Hello and welcome to University Television Presents. My name is Ashley Cox and I will be your host for today. Today we are interviewing Stefanie Stauber and Christy Babcock from International Student Services. Stefanie is a sponsored student support coordinator and Christy is the associate director. So Stefanie, Christy, can both of you tell us just a little bit about your backgrounds?
Sure. I was raised in Boise. I have a degree in cultural anthropology. And after I got my degree, I was in the Peace Corps in Costa Rica for a couple of years. And then I returned to Boise. My first job on campus was with the high school equivalency program, providing support services for those students on campus. And then in 2001, a position as a half-time international student advisor became open at Boise State. I was not well-versed on the immigration aspect of this job, but I had experience working with people from other countries, and I had experience with student services on campus, and so I think that's what helped me get the job, and then I've been here for 12 years.
Very nice. Stefanie?
I studied anthropology as well. I'm originally from Switzerland. I grew up in Venezuela and moved to the US when I was 11. I went to high school in Miami, Florida, and then attended University of Florida, and then I got my master's in international education and moved to Boise about 2 years ago and have been with ISS for about a year and a half now.
Very nice. So what is International Student Services, or ISS for short?
Well, we serve to provide all the necessary support services to the international students who come to Boise State. And when we say international students, we're talking about the students who come to the U.S. on a student visa, so they're here for a specific amount of time. We have about 20 students per semester who are here on exchange, meaning they are enrolled in a university back home. They come to Boise State to study abroad for a semester or two. The large majority of the international students at Boise State are here seeking a degree, so they are here long term. And our office helps with cross-cultural concerns. A big portion of what we do is make sure the students understand and follow immigration regulations, provide extracurricular activities. One of our biggest goals is helping international students integrate with the larger campus community and helping the larger campus community understand cross-cultural communication and differences that might occur when they're interacting with international students.
Very cool. And then how did both of you actually become interested to get involved with International Student Services? Like, what drew you to decide to work for this program?
Well, I have been wanting to work with international students since my undergrad. So I got my master's degree in international education to prepare me to work with international students in a higher ed setting. And so I moved to Boise about 2 years ago, as I said, and I was lucky enough to find a job opening with International Student Services and got the job, and I'm so grateful because that's really the one area that I really love so much and that I want to work in, so awesome. I feel really grateful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I would say for me, when I was getting my bachelor's degree, before I knew what anthropology was, I kept saying I wanted a degree. This was when I was a freshman. I wanted a degree in international relations. I didn't know at that time that international relations was poli-sci oriented. And a poli-sci professor helped me figure out that the title of what I was really interested in was anthropology. So I got my bachelor's in anthropology, and it's just always been kind of fascinating and interesting for me to learn about people from other countries and cultures, learn about different languages. And, you know, like I said, I was on campus already, and this position came open, and I wasn't fully familiar with International Student Services and what an International Student Advisor did, but it just seemed a really good fit for who I was as a person.
Awesome. Very cool. So with ISS, what are some of the programs and activities that you offer to international students?
You want to talk about sponsored student programs?
Sure. Yeah, so I specifically work with government-sponsored students, And our two large groups are Saudi Arabian government-sponsored students and Kuwaiti government-sponsored students. So we have special programs for those two student populations. One of the programs that is actually coming up next Friday is every semester we organize a lunch where we invite faculty from all over campus to share a traditional Middle Eastern meal with the students, to provide a space, a casual space where faculty and students get to know each other and can learn about each other, and the faculty can learn about the students' culture. And the students put together a presentation and they cook for the event. So it's a really exciting program that we started last semester.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We also have a peer mentor program where students who have demonstrated academic excellence get partnered with students who are struggling academically or who are new to Boise State and want a little bit of extra guidance. And so far, this is the first semester, but we're off to a pretty good start.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Nice to see that there's...
And there's other programs
other
too.
things that we do for the entire international student population and that we invite domestic students to. Coffee and Conversation is a weekly event that we've had going now for 3 years, every Wednesday, 3:30 to 5:30. It's a drop-in event. Some Wednesdays we have 10 people, sometimes we have 50 people. And there's food, and it's just unstructured conversation, students getting to know each other. We have the World Cup of Tea program that students apply to, and it's a more structured way to help American students and international students spend time together and get to know each other. We do a lot of just various activities. We do a Thanksgiving dinner for international students. We do day trips during spring break to Hot Springs or Sun Valley. And then just random activities from time to time, like ice skating at Idaho Ice World, and so things like that.
That's awesome. So how many international students would you say that Boise State has, and where are the majority of them from?
Mm-hmm.
So from the numbers so far this semester, it's close to 700 total.
Wow.
But more than half of those students are from either Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. Right now, those two populations have really boomed on our campus in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. 300 approximately Saudis and 140 or so Kuwaitis. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the students are from many different places. Before the sponsored students, before that population really grew really fast, for us a big group meant 25 students from the same country. And so for the first 9 years I was involved in ISS, our biggest groups were always India with 25 or 30 students, Canada, China, Japan, and that was about it. And so those are still big in our former definition of big, and then in addition to these really big groups we have.
Wow, that's awesome. So would you say that the ISS program is actually growing with the popularity of the university? So do you see an increase in international students each semester or each year?
Do you want to talk about from your point of view?
Sure. I think so. I think one of the factors that led to the growth is that the Kuwaiti and Saudi Arabian government have scholarship programs where that have grown a lot, and they have been sending thousands and thousands of students, not just to the United States, but all over the world, to countries like New Zealand, Australia, Japan, all over to pursue higher education. And so in the US alone, there's about over 80,000 Saudi Arabian students, and somehow they have found Boise, which we're so grateful for because they bring so much to our campus. And but I think also the students tend to have a great experience here, and they go back home and tell their friends, and so their cousins and family members, and so that's how also word of mouth, our university has become more popular for students.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So besides word of mouth, like you said, is there anything like when you interact with students that draws them to Boise State, or is it just the option of this is an American school, American education? So anything specific?
When we've surveyed students in the past, the number one answer by far about how they got to Boise State is word of mouth. They knew somebody who was already here, or maybe they had an uncle who studied here 20 years ago, or you know, their parents know somebody who lived in their own country who's from this area. That seems to be a big reason that we receive international students at Boise State. International students tend to say they feel very welcome here and they feel very safe here, and that is a big factor when they're looking at schools. So I think having that reputation has been very helpful.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I also think our engineering program has brought in a lot of international students. Boise State has a great college of engineering, pretty reputable, so I think that definitely helps. And so there's several factors, not just one dominant factor. But I know that our international admissions office is recruiting right now, actually in Asia, and trying to bring in students from more diverse countries to Boise State.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you think some of the benefits are to the international students for being here at Boise State specifically?
How do they benefit, or how do we as a university benefit?
Both. Because
Okay.
it's nice to see the different cultures intermingling, obviously.
Well, I grew up in Boise, and I think the community at Boise State is changing, where we're getting more students from out of state. But traditionally, Boise State population has been Idaho students. And I think it's a fairly small percentage of Idahoans that do a lot of traveling outside of the U.S. And so one thing I think is great about having the international students at Boise State, it's a way for Idaho students to make connections with other parts of the world, to learn about other parts of the world without having to leave Boise. So I think that's one of the benefits. Also, having students in the classroom presenting sometimes very different perceptions, very different experiences, very different world views. It's good to have that, when a lot of our classrooms are filled with students who grew up very much the same. It's great to throw in some people who might share something that's completely different and cause someone to look at whatever the topic of conversation is in a different light.
Very cool.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what international students benefit from being here?
I think international students like Boise, students always mention how friendly people are here. And I think it's very easy to feel at home in Boise. And I know for our Saudi and Kuwaiti students, they say that the landscape in Boise kind of reminds them of home a little bit. As Christy mentioned, it's really safe. Some students complain that it's boring, that there's not a lot to do, but at the same time, that's actually a benefit because it's a place where they can really focus on their studies and not have too many distractions going on, like if they were in a big city like New York or San Francisco. So I think it's a really good place to study, and I think the students realize that.
Very cool. So with international students, since they are international, some of them aren't able to work. And so what are some of the ways that they have been able to find work to support themselves over here?
So immigration law, for the kind of visa that these students come on, the government would say you requested a visa to study in the U.S., so your primary activity needs to be studying. So you can work 20 hours a week or less on campus only. So they are not allowed to go off campus and find work. It's hard to find work on this campus. That's been our experience anyway. And work-study jobs are for U.S. citizens or permanent residents only because that money comes from the U.S. government. So international students don't qualify for work-study positions, and a lot of the positions on this campus are work-study related. So students find, whatever jobs they can on campus, tutoring, sometimes it's in food services or janitorial services. We typically hire only international students in our office because they're great messengers to the students who would be coming to our office for support. International students are allowed to do internships. They can be approved for internships, and a lot of them take advantage of that. We try to help advertise all the different jobs on campus. It kind of makes me sad that I see a lot of international students in positions on campus that are related to food service or janitorial positions. And we've had this conversation many times over the years that we'd love to see international students in some of these student positions where they're serving the public or they're developing more marketable skills than just food service and janitorial. Sometimes, culture and language has something to do with that. But we have a good partnership with a lot of different places on campus who will let us know, hey, we're hiring, let your students know to look
Very
on Bronco
cool.
Jobs. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, international students pay out-of-state tuition. So for many students, it's very difficult to afford. And actually, Boise State offers scholarships to students, to international students, which not many universities do. I think that's pretty unique. The government-sponsored students their tuition is fully covered, and they get a monthly stipend. They get health insurance and round-trip tickets to go back home once a year. So they're in a completely different position. But we have students from Nepal and from Venezuela or Colombia or other places where their parents are funding their education, and some of them need to work in order to make it, and so it's very expensive for them to study in the U.S.
And there is a special work permit that an international student can apply for if they find themselves in an economic hardship situation. So when a student applies to Boise State and they get the immigration paperwork they need to request their visa, they have to show funding for 1 full school year. And so then later, if the student needs to be able to work off campus for economic hardship reasons, the government wants to know, okay, what has changed in your situation? You showed that this funding existed. So if something unexpected and out of the student's control has happened, I often use the example that maybe the father is paying the bills, the father gets in an accident and can't work for a while. That's the sort of thing that the U.S. government would grant a temporary work permit so the student could work anywhere they needed to off campus to make the money to pay their tuition.
Okay. Good to know. Stefanie, this one can be for you. Who supports the international students financially? Is it the U.S. government, their government? So since you work with the Saudi Arabians and the Kuwaits, maybe you can be able to dive into that a little more.
Yeah, sure. So the Saudi and Kuwaiti governments have implemented scholarship programs to basically send students abroad so that they can develop skills and the education in sectors where the country needs native skilled workers to enhance their development. So in engineering, medical fields. And so students are sent all over the world and to the U.S. to study and under a fully funded scholarship. And so those students are in a pretty amazing position to have the financial support of their governments, so that they can focus on studying 100%. Some of them work, but most of the students don't feel the need that they have to work because their stipend is actually pretty generous. Mm-hmm. And so those students are in a pretty lucky position. Otherwise, mostly, and Christy can probably speak more to this, the students are funded by family members. There's also some students who are funded by their companies or different organizations to study. in the U.S., and so it depends on the student. But I guess for the non-government sponsored students, Christy could speak more to that.
And I guess I would say international students wouldn't qualify to fill out the FAFSA and get any kind of funding from the U.S. government. Sometimes there's scholarships out there that are open to all students across the nation, but often it'll say for U.S. citizens or permanent residents only, that sort of thing. But then there are other scholarships that come from U.S. donors that don't specify that. So there are scholarships students can apply for. A lot of the graduate students, the international graduate students, are getting funding through their departments here at the university. So it's very individual. Like I said, a lot of family members might fund these students. Some of these students maybe worked a lot at home for a few years and saved up money before they came here.
Very cool. So, Stefanie, Christy, both of you co-facilitated a highly popular session at the NAFSA, trying to get that right, conference in Tacoma. The session was Challenges, Successes, and Lessons Learned in Working with Student Sponsors by the Saudi Arabian and Culture Mission. And then can you both kind of just explain what that actual session was and some of the content that you shared with people who were in attendance?
Sure. One thing that was kind of exciting, as our numbers of sponsored students started growing, so 3 years ago we had 4 Kuwaitis and about 40 Saudis, and now we have 300 Saudis and 150 Kuwaitis. So those numbers grew really, really fast for us. When I saw that those numbers were starting to grow, and these students require some additional kinds of support than, say, a regular international student. Also, the sponsor interacts a ton with Boise State and requests and needs different things from our office. So when I saw that these numbers were growing, I realized we needed one person who could just be the Boise State liaison for these students and their sponsors. And then that's when we were able to hire Stefanie. And then Stefanie did a great job of coming up with different strategies, such as the Cultural Lunch and Learn, putting together a presentation for Boise State faculty so they could understand the Middle Eastern culture a little better and understand some of the behaviors they were seeing that were maybe very different than what they were used to seeing in the classroom. So Stefanie did a lot of things that other schools weren't doing yet. We worked with some colleagues in other schools and shared ideas because they were feeling this same pressure that we've got this growing group of students that's different than what we're used to working with, and what are some strategies you're using. But we kind of felt like we were leading the path in a lot of ways, thanks to the things Stefanie was coming up with, and we wanted to present on what we had learned so far. And it hadn't even been very long the first time we presented. It had only, I think it had been less than a year, but we wanted to present on this is what we've learned, and let's as a group collaborate. Stefanie started a Yahoo group list email thing for sharing ideas with colleagues across the nation. I'll let you talk more about it.
Yeah, so one of the challenges with the Saudi Arabian Cultural Mission is that they grew very fast, and so a lot of their policies and procedures are pretty unclear, and they're kind of an obscure organization. They don't really, they just came to visit us actually this week, some representatives, but universities are kind of looking to each other for support on how to handle certain issues. So we decided that we needed to provide a space on a national level where universities can come together and share best practices and share ideas and just be able to bounce off questions off each other. And so we started this listserv that has grown, and right now there's universities from all over the nation participating in active discussions, and I think we really have done a good job at leading the way and kind of centralizing the questions and helping our colleagues across the country collaborate more when it comes to working with SACM.
That's really cool.
And you mentioned that we presented in Tacoma, and that was last year at our regional NAFSA conference, but then we actually were accepted to present at the national NAFSA conference, which pulls in like 8,000 people.
Wow.
And we did that in May, so it's kind of fun. We got to do it at a bigger level too.
That's really cool. That's awesome. So Christy, one for you. The NAFSA conference, there's also one in Washington, D.C. Discussing, it was like Advocacy Day. And then you talked about advocacy for international education. What kind of did you talk about in that session when you got to share?
So what I participated in DC is something that National NAFSA puts on every year called Advocacy Day, bringing, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3 people from each state. And first it's a full day of training on how to advocate for international education. How to tell a good story that's relevant to international education so that our representatives, our state representatives, will hear us and want to support international education. Some states are better than others at putting funding towards things like international education. So we had one day of training on how to be a good advocate, and then the second day we met with our state representatives. And we didn't always get to meet with the actual representatives. Sometimes we met with the aide and just talked about the big issues in international education right now. And one is immigration reform, and just talking to them about why they should support, they should vote for immigration reform. That was the idea behind Advocacy Day, and then also to give us training and tools on how to advocate even at smaller levels on our very own campus for the population that we serve.
Yeah, I would say oftentimes at colleges and universities, like at Boise State, for example, athletics is has a very big focus, and sometimes colleges don't put as much focus on internationalization, and so advocating for that is a big part of what people in our field are very involved with at an institutional level.
Awesome. Well, Stefanie, Christy, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing your hearts about International Student Services. It's been awesome to hear. This has been a University Television production. My name is Ashley Cox, and thank you so much for joining us today.